Hello, we've got another Talking Trisomy podcast. I'm Nick Holliday. This podcast series is brought to you by Soft, where we look for ways to support families and help change the narrative with all things trisomy, trisomy 18, trisomy 13, trisomy 9, all and any other related disorders. So I'm so excited. We have a longtime member of ours, Nancy. Nancy connected with me online just a few weeks ago, and we were chatting over the phone. And I said, Nancy, we got to record this. Nancy has recorded her daughter Caitlin's story. We'll have links to that. We'll talk all about that. But Nancy, I'm so glad that you get a chance to join with me. We're just going to talk all things Caitlin today and how just
Awesome.
wonderful her life was lived and what it's meant for you, family, the community. And so, Caitlin, tell us just really quickly, where do you live? Where did you raise Caitlin? And then we'll just get into kind of a flow of this. But thank you for joining
Okay.
us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a real treat to connect with you. My husband and I were living in the Quad Cities when we had Caitlin. This was back in 1988, long time ago. But we were there living with our two other daughters at the time when Caitlin was born on March 28th. So we were loving being there. We didn't think we were going to stay because of some work situations. We were going to move to Chicago. But when Caitlin was born and we found out when she was 9 days old that she had trisomy 18, that changed our plans. And we decided to stay in Davenport, Iowa. So that's where we were.
Awesome. Now, where are you today? Are you still in the
Oh,
Davenport area or where are you at now?
no, no. As a matter of fact, back in January of 1993, we moved down to Missouri again for my husband's work. And we lived in Blue Springs, which is an eastern suburb of Kansas City. And then he passed away 2.5 years ago. And our daughter, Lauren, who lives in Smithville, wanted me to be closer to her. And actually, my husband had said to me too, when he was gone, I should move up there. So I made the big move about a year and a half ago and still adjusting. It was a big change because Smithville is a quiet little suburb north of Kansas City, but I'm still in the Kansas City area, but I'm close to a really big lake, which is nice. I
Oh,
love
that's
the
awesome.
nature, the walks, and just, the quiet. I kind of feel like I'm in the country, but technically I'm not.
There you go. You get a little bit of all of that. But
Right.
between Iowa and Missouri and just the Midwest, Nancy, thanks for joining with us. Hopefully, the weather's not too bad for you. But we just are so
No.
grateful. When I was looking over the story, Caitlin's story that you've so eloquently written, we were just
Thank you.
chatting, Nancy and I, about how to maybe publish this. So this might become a book someday, but right now there's a nice PDF that we'll have available. It is a really well written story. But let's just kind of
Thank
go
you.
back in time to that 1988. I was only 5 years old, so yeah, it was a long time ago. My kids would say that that was very very old, right?
Right.
Um, so, but tell us a little bit about what's going on. The diagnoses, the feelings. Let's set the
Okay.
stage on those early days.
Okay. Well, Caitlin was actually my sixth pregnancy, but third um, living child to be born. About a month though before she was born, I felt like there was something wrong. My doctor assured me there wasn't anything wrong, but for that whole month before, I was prepared to hear some really bad news. Um, and so when she was born at the local hospital, I'd been dealing with kind of a nerve issue in my left arm for that whole month. And by the time I went into labor, it was up in my chest. Thought I was having a heart attack. The doctor didn't say a word. Finally, she was born, but it was a very short labor. Nobody said anything. And I wanted to find out, was she alive? Because that was my fear, was she wouldn't be born alive. And instead I said, is it a girl? Knowing in my heart it was a girl. And when I said that, suddenly, she let out her first cry and the room came alive and I didn't get to see her. They whisked her away and my husband had this horrible expression of dread and I'm trying to find out what's going on. Nobody would tell me anything. They took her away and called in well, I guess he'd be a specialist. He was a pediatrician. I'd never met him. And then he came in to tell me he had looked her over. She was small for her. Birth weight was only 4 pounds, 5.5 ounces, but that he had examined her and she had one floating rib that was missing. She had some Bell's palsy on her left cheek, but otherwise she was fine. And I thought, "No, she's not. Why don't you tell me what's wrong with her?" But he assured me, no, she was gonna be fine. And so then I got to go down to the nursery. I couldn't hold her. They had her, like, in an isolette, with some oxygen and different things, and I'm like, "What's going on?" So, at any rate, she was born on a Monday, and every day that week, her condition deteriorated where they thought she had an infection of some kind. She was jaundiced, so they put her under the lights, gave her different things to fight an infection. And then when she was 5 days old, they transferred her to Iowa City to a major hospital there. And so she got there, she arrived on that Saturday the next morning during the middle of the night, and I got to stay there in a room near her, they did a total blood transfusion. They thought she had an infection. So she was isolated in this room all by herself. I couldn't go in to see her. When they did the blood transfusion, it took 3 hours. And I would walk down and try to see something, but there were so many people in that room working on her and getting, the blood out and then putting the blood in. So that was a long process for her tiny little veins. So that was Easter Sunday, actually. And the resident who had helped with that procedure talked to me every day that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, even Wednesday morning and said, "She's getting better. You're going to get to take her home. She'll be a healthy little girl." And every day until Wednesday, I doubted her. Wednesday, I started to think, well, maybe she is going to be okay. And then that afternoon, I had 5 doctors come in to tell me the blood results, the blood test results that they had received. One doctor did the speaking, and the 4 others just sat there and looked at me, and I was by myself. My husband hadn't come back yet. He was gonna arrive that afternoon, from Davenport, where he was with our other girls. So I got the news, from this doctor and immediately asked, and basically what he said to me was, "Well, we got the results back. The news is not good. Your daughter has a terminal condition. There's nothing we can do for her." That was it. And I'm like, What kind of condition?" "Well, it's called Edwards syndrome. They had only known about it for 15 years, and there wasn't much that he knew about it." I'm I need to read things. I'm a visual kind of person too. And I said, "Well, is there any literature, anything?" This was before the internet, so I couldn't Google it. I didn't have a cell phone. They weren't in existence. And he said, "Well, I'll ask a nurse to check our files to see if there is anything." So a few hours later, the nurse came with one article, but thankfully in that article, they referred to Soft and there was no phone number. Just it was like coming from a federal department out of Washington, D.C. So I got on the phone, got the phone number, called them. They said they had the current president's name and phone number. So I called. It was not the current president. It was somebody else. So anyway, I got tracked it down and finally got to talk to the president, which that have been your mom, do you think, Nick?
In 1988, it might have been Barb Van Herway. Does that sound
Oh,
familiar?
that's right. It was Barb. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, she told me about the conference, and we ended up taking Caitlin in July. So we had her several months by that time and met Dr. Carey, all the people that I still see a lot of them associated with SOF. And we got a lot of wonderful information there. I was so thankful because I got nothing from my local doctors.
Yeah. The life of pre-internet, makes us all feel like
Oh,
dinosaurs when I've tried to explain certain things to my 16-year-old, right?
oh, I
And
bet.
so to live in that, tell me about some of the feelings you had. I mean, you went through a lot. There was, watching your daughter have
Yeah.
blood transfusions and other things, but tell me a little bit about the feelings that you felt through those moments.
Well, when she was born in Davenport, the nurses there were amazing. And when we realized she had to be transferred to this other hospital, and we couldn't follow the ambulance, so an ambulance had to take her. One of the nurses who kind of took me under her wing walked us to the door and said, if they can't do anything for her in Iowa City, bring her back here. We will take care of her. And I thought to myself, I'm probably going to need to do that. And so we got over there. Everything was very much initially okay. We're going to figure this out, get her on the road to recovery, and you'll be taking her home. But then once we got the news that she had this terminal condition, everything stopped. As soon as the doctors left, I went running down to her room, which was an isolation room in the NICU, and they had stripped her of anything that might be helping her. Here was this little tiny baby on a flat table, and there was nothing in the room. No oxygen, nothing. And so I went running to the nurses station and I said, I want my baby out of here. I need to take her away to home or to back to Davenport, which they said that couldn't happen. Insurance had to be consulted and she'd have to go by ambulance. So then I went back to the waiting room where I'd gotten this news, and my husband arrived, and a social worker stopped in to talk to us and to share with him this diagnosis that I had been told. And she had asked me before he came, did I want her to do that? And I said yes, because I was hoping she might have some additional details. And so I sat there while she talked to my husband, basically. And when she finished, she said, I just need you both to know that most marriages fail after the birth or death of a child. And I just looked at her like, what are you telling us? And I was really upset because I thought, you don't even know us. And why are you planting this seed when we just got the news that our daughter has this condition? So that was very upsetting, and, I figured I didn't wanna talk to her anymore, and my husband didn't either. So, yeah, our goal was just get her out of there because the attitude was, "There's nothing we can do," so they were not gonna even deal with her, offer anything. Yeah, so, I called the nurse back in Davenport, told her what had happened, and she said, "Okay, well, let me see what I can do." And I thought, well, I didn't know what she could do. But then, within, I bet it was 12 hours, maybe 15, she called and said, "An ambulance is coming to get Caitlin Friday morning." So she only had to stay there the rest of Wednesday, which was a few hours, and then Thursday, and then they took her back on Friday. So then we were able to have her close to our home and then deal with, the lack of knowledge that that hospital had. Not one doctor, not one nurse, nobody had ever seen a baby with trisomy 18. All they heard was she'll die within 2 weeks. Well, she didn't need anything. She really didn't even need oxygen, but they gave her a small amount so insurance would pay for her to be there. I had to be discharged, obviously, but they let me stay nearby as much as I wanted to be. And but the hard thing was they put her in a room where all the newborns are brought in, weighed and measured, and you could see these healthy newborn babies. And frequently the parents would come in to that room too. And I'm there with my daughter who never weighed more than her birth weight. And at one point, I even saw a baby who weighed 13 pounds. And I'm just like, why, God? Why is this, happening kind of thing? So I questioned at the time why she had to have that condition. But at the same time, because I had had other miscarriages or had three miscarriages, I should say, and I questioned why those had happened. I felt like Caitlin gave me some closure and answers to why we didn't have those other three babies, that likely they had a genetic disorder as well. And so by loving her, I was able to love the babies I never saw. So she was a great source of healing for me in that grieving process. We had some really amazing things, though, happen during just while she was at the hospital. We every day was like a gift because I was told she's not gonna live very long, but that she didn't need anything, and I really wanted to be able to take her home. Her pediatrician, Dr. Barry, would come in every day and he'd say, "No, no, she needs to stay here." So we passed, the 2-week mark, which is what I've been told she wouldn't survive beyond, and she continued to live in the hospital. They finally put her in another room. I could hold her, I could feed her. She did not like the feeding tube in her nose. She was very much a fighter, and she would pull it out. And so I talked to the nurse who had helped me, and I said, "What can I do? Because she needs to be fed," which I was using a breast pump, so it was breast milk. And she goes, "Well, I've got an idea." So she got this bottle that is used for babies who have cleft palates. It's a soft-sided bottle, and you could kind of squeeze the sides to get in the rhythm with her swallowing, which trisomy 18 babies have. Normally, I believe most of them have a swallowing dysfunction. And so I was able to work with her swallowing ability to get this nourishment down her throat. And and she did great. It was a great way to feed her. It took a while, but it worked. And so then when my other daughters came to visit, she was able, or they were able, especially my 8-year-old, to feed their baby sister. So we continued on, and I kept asking the pediatrician, "When can I take her home?" "Well, we'll see." The situation too was he knew my husband was working in Chicago 4 days out of 7, and then I would be home alone with the three girls. But that didn't bother me. And I guess in his mind, he told me this later, that he was afraid once I got her home, she would die right away and I would feel guilty. And I kept saying to him, "I want her home. I want us to be able to love her so she would know we were her family. And I wanted to know that she was my daughter. I needed that bonding time with her." And so finally, when she was exactly 5 weeks old, um, a doctor from Iowa City came to do a clinic, and he's examining her, and he looks at me and he goes, "Why is this baby in the hospital?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I want to take her home." And the pediatrician was there, and he looked at him and he goes, "Release this baby today." So we got to take her home that day. The day before was a birthday. We would celebrate every monthly birthday. So the day before was her birthday, and she had lots of attention by that time from the nurses. So we had a birthday party. They brought a cake in, and then they had another party the day she got to go home. So they really were in tune with celebrating her life, which is what I wanted to do, to celebrate every day, because every day was another birthday in my mind. And one of my sisters who lives on the West Coast wanted to come so badly, but she had her own family and responsibilities and couldn't come. And so she every month would create a birthday card celebrating that month of Caitlin's birthday. So that meant a lot to me too. So I had a lot of support from our church and just long distance support, I guess you'd say, with phone calls and cards and all kinds of things. But no support from the hospital, I guess, in Iowa City.
Yeah, I mean, I think that times are changing. I was a good, but
Thank,
sadly,
thank goodness.
there's still a lack of information. I talked to some of the
Yeah,
experts, and they're like, "We're still fewer in numbers compared to my partners," or the fact that the odds of an OB doctor or an OBGYN maybe only seeing, just statistically speaking, maybe one child with a specific chromosome disorder
yes,
like trisomy 18. And so there's just this limited. The good news is we're trying to flood all this information out there so that way if someone does Google or
great.
Chat GPT, hopefully these stories come up and other things so somebody doesn't have to walk
Yes,
that same path. But what I think is
yes,
still common is your instinct. You talked kind of about, you were getting told one thing and we'll give the doctors the credit that they were doing the best they had with what they had. They were going to encyclopedias. The kids, I don't know if
right,
all kids know what that is, right? And they were going to their medical
right.
journals, printed books. Um,
Yes,
and so they were giving you and the term which we've talked a lot about in these podcasts is incompatible with life, which is what they're telling you. We read
yes,
here Edward syndrome equals 2 weeks living. Expect right, same story in 1977 for my sister, but um, so anyway, I want to talk a little bit about not necessarily the evolution of the thing, but the fact that the parent, we'll call it intuition, but just your parent awareness. It's kind of
yes.
stood out to me. One, as you're telling those stories, and two, as I read Caitlin's story, the part that you've written. There just seems to be something. Can you expound a little bit about just kind of how you navigated what you were hearing versus what you were feeling?
Well, I think it's, a lot of it's mother's instinct, which for my relationship with Caitlin began a month before she was born even, sensing something was wrong and wanting to know what was wrong. And I felt like I had a lot of no's or doors that were closed to me as I tried to figure it all out. Um, and getting the article, getting connected with Soft helped me get to the conference. But, I would take Caitlin to her pediatrician for, oh, I think we were going every week at first and then every other week. And he just would kind of shake his head like he didn't understand, probably why she was still there, number one. Um, and she didn't gain weight. That was a concern for me. And I was trying to figure out ways that she could gain weight, but not, Tom and I, my husband and I didn't want any extreme measures done. One of the couples we met at the soft conference had a boy who was, I believe, 10 months old at the time. And they had him on, tube feedings and all kinds of stuff, which everything they had him on led back to more hospitalizations. Our goal was not to prolong her life through extreme measures that would require her to be in the hospital. We didn't want her life to be full of tests or surgeries unless we did ask about like a heart surgery, but we're told no, that wasn't possible. There's nothing that's going to help her. And so I thought, well, if they can't help her, I don't want her to have things that would require further hospitalizations or doctor visits or constant, medication, whatever that could be. And so I was really I wanted to find other families who had a terminally ill child or had had one, somebody I could relate to because there was nobody in my family. nobody at my church that I was aware of until we were able to take Caitlin to church. And that's when I found out all these other moms who had had babies who died, either while they were pregnant or shortly after birth, who never got to hold their babies. They were just drawn to Caitlin, and when they would hold her, you could just, the tears would come down because they were able to grieve over their lost child or children. One in particular, I'd known this couple for years, several years, and found out that they had lost twin boys, right at birth, and they were not the mom or dad was allowed to hold them. And so all that repressed grief really stood out to me, and that's why I knew it was important, for me, my husband, our other girls, to have the time with Caitlin where they would really know her as part of the family. So that was, part of what kept me driving forward to get information as much as I could and to make those connections with other families. So,
Love that. And I think it's fair to say, what you and your husband wanted to do, what your goals were. Um, we've tried to hopefully make it aware of all the various decision making. I've talked to some parents, they kind of said this, and their children were born in the 2000s, was just like, we're going to,
mm,
we're going
oh,
to do what we have. And our child will kind of, will know when it's time to either stop fighting or a variety of things. And so I think to me and as an organization, our biggest hope is that parents can make those decisions and be empowered with it, with knowledge.
yes.
And the heart surgery comment is interesting. Next week, I know this is all like, you could be listening to this 2 years from now, but one podcast that's coming out soon based on when we're recording today, this daughter had heart surgery because techniques and things have improved,
Oh,
right? And so in the last 10
mhm,
years, she had a heart surgery. And so there's kind of this evolution, right? Technology is getting better. We're having this wonderful conversation miles apart,
yes,
not possible.
yes,
So what we hope is that as advancement and these amazing doctors, technologists, all these people that are evolving the field of medicine, we hope that you consider opportunities to increase the resources for kiddos with trisomy 18, 13, others.
yes.
So yeah, so I know
That
that
is
times
awesome.
time change for good, times hopefully change for the better. But that is an interesting. I think there's a lot of commonality with what you have felt.
Mhm,
You know, uh, prenatal diagnoses was just. I was talking to somebody in there, or I think it was my mom, and she's just like, you look like a snowstorm, like an old fashioned static when they did the ultrasound, right? That's like, and the
right?
doctor's like, "This is a boy," and my mom's like, "All I see is pixels and whites, and like I can't make out this." She says, "Then my little brother, 6 years younger than me, she's like, oh yeah, I can see a body there, right? How times
Yeah,
change just in 83 to 89, right? What a wonderful thing. So,
yes,
but
yes. I
but
love
at
it.
the end of the day, and why I wanted to bring it up, and you said it so perfectly, is so your mother's intuition. You kind of just felt, you and Caitlin have this
Yeah,
bond naturally. When I look at my kids and
yes,
my wife, right, there's a bond between a mom and the child because there is,
yes.
and you did it together. Um,
Yep,
we hope that that can be followed and listened to. The second thing that
yes,
really stood out to me, and I want to talk more about this because I want to talk about how Caitlin lived. You said that specifically in your story. Caitlin
yes.
being held by your fellow parishioners, your fellow congregational members at your church, being touched by her. How amazing is that? Caitlin, what blessings she brought to others, even if it was shorter than we wanted. What blessings.
Mhm.
So if you have more stories about how Caitlin lived, I'd love to hear those. Like
Oh,
what?
sure. Well, my goal too was to be as much of a normal family as we could be. I didn't want to go anywhere and have people go, "Oh, that's the baby who's gonna die." No, I don't want that. This is our baby Caitlin. So, we would take her places, and even when Tom was out of town working, I would take all 3 girls. We would go to the library, we would go for picnics, we would go shopping, whatever. I got her out in public, which partly was hard too, because of course she's going to attract a lot of attention. And people would come up, strangers would say, "Well, you must have just brought her home from the hospital. She's so tiny." And I'd say, "Well, yeah, we've had her home for a while." And sometimes people would press for more information, and I would just determine how much do they really want to know. I don't want to upset their day by telling them her true condition, but a lot of times I would just say, well, she's our special baby. We have, our other girls here, but Caitlin has some special condition. And so, we are just so thankful we have her, and every day is a gift. So that was one of the messages I would try to share with even strangers, that every day is a gift for everybody, not just Caitlin, but for you and me and everybody. And so, that would be part of it, would be how um, strangers would respond to her, people at church, people who had lost children. One example was my father-in-law. Um, both my mother and father-in-law are deceased, but when Caitlin was still in the hospital, I think she was about 3 weeks old, um, a week after she got back to Davenport, they came to see her, but they met me at the house, and, my father-in-law was a tough, tough guy, not, always happy to be around, and had a lot of anger within himself. And so they talked about everything but Caitlin when they got there. And I'm like, I want him to go see her. I want him to, be able to hold her, because by that time they could. And so I said, well, we need to get to the hospital to see Caitlin. And my father-in-law just burst into anger and said, well, that's all Rose's fault. I'm like, what's Rose's fault? Well, her condition. And I knew what he meant, because Rose was an aunt, or a sister to my mother-in-law, and she had had a child with Down syndrome. And he believed that she had cursed the family, our side of the family, and that's why Caitlin was the way that she was. Well, my mother's instinct, or whatever you wanna call it, kicked in, and I had never been disrespectful to that man in the entire time I'd known him, and I burst out and I said, "Don't ever call her a curse, an accident, or anything that you can label her with. She's your granddaughter. She's my daughter. She is made the way that God made her to be. And I'm going to the hospital to see her. If you want to see your granddaughter, you need to get in the car." And my mother in law, who would never have said those things to him, stood there with her, her mouth open, shocked that I said it. I was shocked that I said it, and he was too, but they immediately followed me out to the car. And when we got to the hospital and we were able to have, that private room, so to speak, I was able to get her out of her isolette and put her into his arms so that he would know this was his granddaughter. And it led to a special moment several months later with him, where I could see God was finally softening his heart. And we ended up, before he passed away at the age of 90, we were able to have a relationship where he shared why he had been angry for all those years. It was an amazing thing. And I believe Caitlin was the beginning of that, because not just seeing her and holding her, but he and I were the only two people who saw her smile when we took her to visit in Chicago in August. So it was just weeks before she passed away that we got two smiles from her. The same moment, same instant. He and I were the only ones who got to see that. So it helped with me and being able to talk to him and find out what really, was at the basis of all of his anger. So I'm so thankful to Caitlin for that too.
What a life. Has stuck with, been with your family in spirit, in person, the smiles that the two of you had.
Yes.
There's just a lot
Yeah.
of opportunity that these wonderful kids, um no matter what, will change lives. And I guarantee that. I'm a different person because of my sister Carrie. Like, and I imagine
I
your
bet.
daughters say the same thing, knowing that
Yes.
their younger sister was part of their life, even for a short time. So what a blessing. Um,
Thank you.
did you? I'd love to have you just keep
I was
telling
just
more stories. What else is coming to mind? Community wise, church, or
well,
keep going.
yeah. Well, and I we do have pictures of Caitlin out, and I think like a lot of parents, you have a frame, and every year the child gets a new school picture, and you replace it, and then eventually, an 8 by 10 that you hang on the wall. I had Caitlin's 8 by 10 in one of those pictures, in one of those frames rather, with her sisters around her, knowing that their pictures were gonna change, they were gonna become older, grow up, but her picture wasn't gonna be changing. And so now I have 7 grandchildren, and they see Caitlin's picture, hanging, or I have a little one on my refrigerator, different places around, and so they know who Caitlin is as well. And we did have another daughter after Caitlin, which, that was termed a geriatric pregnancy because I was a whole 36 years old when I had my last daughter, Natalie. And one time she said to me, "Well, I probably wouldn't have been born if Caitlin had lived." And I said, "Well, why would you say that?" "Well, because you would have had your 3 daughters." I said, "Well, no, that's not true because I always felt like, and this will sound a little crazy, that I was supposed to have 7 children, and Natalie was my 7th pregnancy. And I said, when I had her, I knew she would be the last child, and she was. So she has a different perspective, is what I want to share. It's not that she didn't know Caitlin, only from the pictures, and I have a book with pictures from the day she was born until her service, which was another amazing experience because we had the support of our church. We had 3 pastors, they all participated, but also our oldest daughter's grade sang at the service. So we had those children who were impacted by Caitlin. I mean, the whole school, which was affiliated with the church, everybody knew who she was, and the nurses, she had quite a following. So getting back to Natalie though, um, I think she was surprised by that, but I also wanted her to know she was really planned, not just by me, but by God. And so she was our baby who was not affected by a personal relationship with Caitlin, but by the pictures and the stories that we were able to share with her. So that, and um, I guess I wanted to say too, I did try to give Caitlin a life that would have been similar to her sisters. And so when we went to Chicago in August that year, and she passed away September 5th, so it was just a couple weeks before she passed away. We went to the Brookfield Zoo because we would always do that every summer with the other girls. And there was a lady, when we got onto the train, because we always took the train ride, we were sitting in the front row, and this older couple with their adult daughter sat behind us. And the lady leaned forward and said to me, "You have a special baby, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, we do." And she said, "Well, just treasure every moment you have with her. That's always said, but I thought, I bet she had a special baby or knows of one. And that was very sweet of her to share that with me. So I did get encouragement, from strangers as well. And one of them I wrote about in her story was at a park when I took the girls to this park in the middle of Davenport where there was a pond, well, pretty good sized one, and lots of grass. You could have a picnic at a shelter, or you could sit out on the grass. And that's where we chose to sit. I had a blanket out, had lunch. The two older girls were on the blanket. I was sitting next to them holding Caitlin, and it was in the middle of an expanse. We weren't close to trees or anything where somebody might have been sitting or waiting or enjoying the day. And so I'm looking down at Caitlin, and when I look up, there is a man standing there with a small boy at his side. And I suspected this was not a human being. I'll just say, I think it was perhaps an angel. Maybe I don't know how he got there so quickly. And his message basically was, you have been blessed with a special baby. She is a gift from God. And I'm like, yes, I know. And so I looked down, looked back up, and he was gone, just like that. I looked around, they were nowhere to be found. So I was encouraged by that message. And, whether people believe in angels' visits or not, that's what I took it as. And I was very um, touched by that. And those words were the ones that I used then when I think I shared about the baby after Caitlin had been born. I had offered to be a support to other parents who had a terminally ill child.
With me.
Well, after Caitlin passed away on September 5th, I told the nurses at the hospital if other parents had babies born with any kind of genetic disorder or terminal condition, anything, not necessarily trisomy 18, that my husband and I would be available for them to talk to if they would like some support. And so that, I think I actually, well, no, that was the first time, was that first Wednesday in December. I got a call from the hospital the nurse said, baby had been born without a brain, and the parents wanted to talk to me. And I had never seen a baby born without a brain. I did not know what to expect, but I thought, it wouldn't be a normal looking baby, maybe. So this was on a Wednesday evening. And thankfully, my church was having a service for Advent where they would offer nursery services for children. So I felt a little guilty since I wasn't going to church, but I took the girls over there, explained what I was doing. They were fine with it, went across the street to the hospital. When I got to the floor and stepped off the elevator, a nurse met me and she said, I need to tell you before you see this couple, they've decided to withhold feeding their baby. And I was a little confused. I'm like, why would they do that? I mean, the baby could eat normally, right? It didn't require a feeding tube. No, it could be bottle fed, but they decided not to. And I said, well, why did they make that decision? Why did they even come up with that idea? And she said, this hospital, which was a Catholic hospital, had a team or committee of advisors who would give people, any patient, about facing whatever issue, options for their care. And so they had given not feeding their baby as an option. I was floored. I mean, I was just really shocked. And I'm thinking as I'm walking down that hallway to the room, I don't know what to say to these people because I'm so upset they're not feeding their baby. And it's like, okay, God, why am I here? And what am I doing? What do you want me to say? And I felt like he was saying to me, just tell them about Caitlin. Just tell them about her. That's all I heard. Got all the way down to the room, and as a matter of fact, this couple was from a small town in western Iowa, 5 miles from where I went to high school. And so when I got to the room and I saw that grandparents were sitting in the hallway, I learned that they had been visiting the grandparents, all the way across the state, and the mom had gone into labor a month early, and this was their first baby. So grandma was really upset. She said her doctor should have known about this, meaning the condition, you know, and should have taken care of it, meaning should have aborted the baby. And so I said, "Is this your first granddaughter?" Because I just wanted them to think in terms of their granddaughter and not a mistake, not an
Yes.
accident or something that shouldn't have happened. And so then I went into the room and dad was holding the baby, standing by the bed, mom sitting up in bed, but dad's holding the baby. And I introduced myself and said, I'm actually from Greenfield, which is 5 miles from where you're from. Oh, okay. Well, that kind of softened the air a little bit. And I looked at the baby and she was beautiful, just looked absolutely like a normal, healthy newborn. And I said something to that effect that, "Oh, your daughter is beautiful." And they're like, "Well, yeah." And the mom said, "Well, this should never have happened." This, meaning her daughter. And I said, "Well, why?" "Well, my doctor should have known this was going to happen and should have taken care of it." Still referring, to her daughter as it. And I said, "Well, you have a beautiful daughter." And the dad said to me, "Well, we understand that you had a daughter who died too. Can you tell us what it was like when she died?" And that's when I said, "Well, I want to tell you how she lived." So then I related some of the experiences that we'd had with her and how she had impacted my life and made a difference not only to my husband, but to me and to so many people. And I gave some examples of that. And I said, "I don't know how long you're going to have with your baby. I don't know if it's going to be a day or two or if you could have longer, but I want you to know I'll be praying for her and that she will know that you are her parents and you will know that she is your daughter." And so I left and I prayed, and then Saturday came along, and I called the hospital thinking, if you starve a baby to death, how long does it take, And so I called the hospital, asked, "When did this baby die?" "Oh, well, they decided to feed her, and they took her home on Friday." And I was thrilled. I thought, "Good, God's giving them time." At the same time, I'm looking into what it means to be born without a brain, and I'm thinking that's just not possible. This baby should have died naturally without a brain. But I thought God's doing something here, and I'm so thrilled. So several months pass. It's now March, the first part of March, and I'm having lunch with the nurse who was my helper all those times. And I asked her, I said, "Did you ever hear when the baby from Fontenelle died?" Because I'm still praying for her. And she said, "Oh, didn't anybody tell you?" And I'm like, "Tell me what?" "Well, the parents took the baby with them to Iowa City when the baby was a month old. So in January, they took her to Iowa City. They were going to have genetic counseling, and they decided to run some tests on the baby. Well, it turned out she just had fluid on her brain. She had a brain. So they drained the fluid, and that baby should still be a healthy 37-year-old. She'll be 38 later this year. Yeah. And so their baby was not born without a brain. And I don't know who misread that diagnosis. Um, or maybe God did a miracle. I don't know. But I was so excited and happy for that family. They still had their baby. So
Just
just so
the
amazed
telling
at,
the
what
telling
we
of
can do when we
stories.
don't
Yeah,
try to control things.
agreed.
Yeah. So Caitlin really was still having positive effects and she still does now. Um, because of her and some other things in my life, my career was really originally in publishing and uh, public relations, some great experiences. But I ended up following what I felt God wanted me to do and working as a minister at my church and care ministry. And so I was able to share about Caitlin's story with many people in that capacity. So she's touched many lives even though she's not here.
What advice would you give other families? You were giving that, story from the early days, but what advice
Yes.
would you want to leave with people?
I think one of the big lessons that I learned by having Caitlin was that it's okay to accept help from other people. I was always raised to be independent, self-sufficient, that kind of thing. Um, not needing people, even though had 5 older brothers and sisters, and parents. But it was hard for me to accept help at first. But when I did, and that by help I mean people wanting to help me with my other girls. I had a lady from my church who would come in the summertime during those weeks and take the girls for half a day. They would go to McDonald's. They would do normal things, bake cookies, whatever. That gave me a break, gave me a chance to sleep or just be with Caitlin. And so I learned from that lady what it meant to her to be able to do that. Because when we help other people, we are helped in return. Just that act that's a blessing to other people is really a blessing to us. And so I learned that it's okay, that in fact, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to help each other. And one of the most memorable times for me was one of our neighbors came to visit. This was an elderly man whose wife had passed away. They didn't have children. Um, I never really knew the story. I never asked him what happened or why. He came to visit us and he brought a hot dish, which I was impressed that he would do that. But he shared while he visited that he and his wife had wanted to have children, but it just wasn't possible for them physically to have children. And I said, "So did you consider adoption?" And he said, "No, we just figured God didn't want us to have children." But he was so thankful. We had moved next door to him where they could enjoy having our daughters nearby, and especially Caitlin. He said seeing Caitlin helped him to um, I guess, grieve for the children they never had. So they didn't even have children, but she helped him to process those feelings that he had suppressed and didn't share with people. So that was a blessing.
Caitlin, blessing a special child indeed, as you felt and even were told. Many great stories. Um,
Yeah.
Nancy, tell us, like, if you were to introduce Caitlin to the world today, what, like, not what she had, but like who she was. How would you want her? How do you remember her? How do you speak about her? Does your family remember her? Kind of wrap things up with what
Okay.
Caitlin means to your family.
That's a great question. Um, I guess if could say one thing, it would be her eyes. I didn't focus on maybe how little she was, although people would remind me, but she had the best eyes. I've got a picture. Can I
Yeah.
show it of
Yeah.
her?
Hold it up on camera. That'd be great.
Okay. Okay. This is how I remember Caitlin. Look how she's laying there with so relaxed and just, you know, staring. Like I said, she only smiled twice. So she's not smiling in this picture, but her eyes just would penetrate mine and we would connect through our eyes. And she also, her fighting spirit, I would say Caitlin, for as tiny as she was, had the fighting spirit of an adult man who boxed, let's say. She didn't want to put up with any of that medical stuff. She had her own mind. She knew what she wanted. She didn't want any tubes. She wanted to be around us, her family. Um, she loved getting out. Um, to me, it was her fighting spirit and just almost a surreal connection that we had just by looking at each other. I felt like she communicated so much with her beautiful blue eyes that she had.
Easy. That's
So
awesome.
she, she didn't, yeah, she didn't, I don't know if I could say the word complain. She rarely cried. I knew when she needed something. We had, that connection when she needed to eat. She taught me patience because feeding her was a slow process, and but she helped me to slow down and appreciate my other girls as well. And the times that, they spent with her, they played house with her. Caitlin was always the baby, and the 8-year-old got to hold the baby and feed her, and, that was her doll. I've got pictures of them where when you get a child's nightgown, sometimes the doll's size comes with it for them to put on their doll. Well, it fit Caitlin perfectly. So she always had a matching nightgown with her sister, oldest sister, and then I would find one that matched the 2-year-old as well. So they loved to dress up alike. Um, but there weren't a lot of preemie clothes back then, which is what she should have had. And so we discovered that Cabbage Patch clothes would fit her. So she wore Cabbage Patch clothes for most of her life because there weren't other preemie clothes available yet. And diapers. We had to special order diapers for her. Okay, there I see you. Well, I don't know if when she passed away, the doctors had said she would go in her sleep. Well, what happened was it was Labor Day weekend, and we had invited a family over for a cookout because the wife was really nervous. She was pregnant with her fourth child. She was very nervous about that pregnancy, wanting to have a daughter and concerned that she might have another boy. So we invited them over. So they were there, and we had eaten. Caitlin was sleeping in her bed, which was, it was like a swing bed where we could detach the bed part and take it and travel with her in our conversion van because she could not be exposed to sunlight. We got sunglasses for her at the soft conference, so she always had those on, and then she had this bed. So she was in her bed, and after we had eaten, and I was outside with the children, all the children, and the other mom and the dads were there with Caitlin. And the older boy, who was probably 8 years old as well as our 8-year-old, um, went in to check on her and said, "She's not breathing." And that's when we um, discovered she had passed away. My husband wanted to take her to the hospital, to the ER, thinking they could do something for her. So we did, and, that turned out to be a blessing because we were able to have her in a room where other people came in to be with us from our church, and the room was filled with these wonderful church members, pastors, and then, somebody went to get our daughter, Liz, and, she was there, and we were able to say goodbye to Caitlin with all those people. And which normally if we had been home and it would have just been me, maybe, or my husband and myself and our other girls, well, that would have been really hard. But we had that support of all those people. And even to release her to somebody from a funeral home, God had that worked out too. It was a neighbor. It was a younger guy. He came and I was able to, you know, give our Caitlin to him, knowing she would be safe. And so I felt like our whole journey with her was such a blessed time of feeling God's care through all these people. And he had it all worked out. He had the days of her life numbered, just like ours. And it wasn't 2 weeks or one day. It was 23 weeks.
It's amazing. I just greatly appreciate you w- having written this down, having thought about, and that Caitlin's story just continue to linger even after these years and how it's affected many a lives. It just really goes to show that as we work to raise awareness, to change, um, you and I aren't the doctors and the technologists making changes on the medical side, but what we can do is tell more stories. And Caitlin's story is very meaningful. So, Nancy, thank you for
Thank
taking the time to share it with us. Um, 2026. We'll mark today as a day that we had this chance to talk. So I'm excited for this story to come out, both in
Me
the
too.
video form. We'll have it transcribed. We'll have it as a blog. We just want more people to hear these stories because, as Caitlin so well demonstrated, it's how you live, and it's the
Yeah.
lives that you bless, and it's the legacy that they live, both while she was living and after her passing. She has blessed the communities that you've been a part of.
Yes.
We are grateful that you were able to go to the Philadelphia conference. That was
Yes.
one of the few that I didn't go to as a little kid. I think it was a little too far from Arizona. But hearing
Oh,
you talking about getting sunglasses, it makes me think of Steve Cantrell,
yes.
who I'm actually talking
Yes.
to. He's the optometrist, and he had a son in the St. Louis area. So we'll
Um,
have his story soon, and just how this web, being able that the fact that you hunted down and it wasn't super convenient to get a hold of Barb or
yeah.
Soft at those early days, but what connections that brought in. But being
Yes.
thoughtful in your community in Davenport and now in the Missouri areas, Kansas City's, what a blessing Caitlin is. But in the
Okay.
meantime, we'll have a link somewhere on the page that they can access it because you do a great job writing it out as much
Thank
as you
you.
did a great job talking about it. So, anyway, Caitlin's story, it's got a really cute title. Um, and so it's a good read. And so I think those of you listening, 4 pounds of promise. God works through the smallest of his creations. So that is your title and subtext. So yeah, it's a great way to learn more about what Caitlin did for your family and for others. So
Thank you.
again, just so grateful for this, Nancy. I'm glad that we connected a few weeks back. I'm grateful for this story. And like many other families with these wonderful, special kids, we want to get as many of them out there. So thank you again. Those of you that are listening, this is Talking Trisomy. We just tell stories. We also interview medical professionals that are doing some crazy cool things that are way beyond my vocabulary. So we'll have some of those coming up too. But again, Nancy, Caitlin's story was today. Please like it, share it, comment. Let's flood the earth with more great stories about wonderful, special kids. And so, again, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Caitlin. This is
Thank
Talking
you.
Trisomy, and until next time.
Thank you.